Tool use intelligence. This is one of the most studied and debated forms of animal intelligence, largely because for a long time, humans considered tool use to be exclusively their own domain. That changed in the 1960s when Jane Goodall observed chimpanzees in Tanzania stripping leaves from twigs and inserting them into termite mounds to extract insects. The scientific community had to reconsider its assumptions almost immediately. Since then, tool use has been documented across a surprisingly wide range of species. Crows fashion hooks from wire to retrieve food from containers. Otters carry specific rocks to crack open shellfish, sometimes keeping a favored stone for repeated use. Elephants have been observed using branches to swat flies and plugging water holes with chewed bark to prevent evaporation. What makes tool use significant as a form of intelligence is what it implies, that the animal has formed a mental connection between an object and a future outcome, which requires a level of forward thinking that goes well beyond instinct. Spatial memory. Some animals navigate and remember their environments with a precision that genuinely defies easy explanation. Clark's nutcracker, a bird found across mountainous regions of western North America, caches up to 30,000 seeds across hundreds of separate locations each autumn and recovers the majority of them months later under snow. It does this without any visible landmark system a human observer could easily identify. The hippocampus, the region of the brain associated with spatial memory, is proportionally enlarged in species that rely heavily on this ability, which suggests the brain physically adapts to support it. Migrating species use spatial memory on an even broader scale. Sea turtles return to the exact beach where they were born to lay their own eggs, debating thousands of miles of open ocean using a combination of magnetic field detection and learned geography that researchers are still working to fully understand. Social intelligence. Living in groups creates problems that solitary animals never have to solve: managing relationships, reading intentions, forming alliances, and navigating hierarchies. Species that live in complex social structures tend to develop correspondingly complex cognitive abilities. Chimpanzees remember individual relationships across decades, form political coalitions, and have been observed consoling distressed group members. Dolphins maintain long-term social bonds and have demonstrated the ability to recognize specific individuals even after years of separation. Elephants grieve their dead, returning repeatedly to the remains of lost herd members and showing behavioral responses that closely resemble mourning. The intelligence required to track, manage, and respond to dozens of individual relationships simultaneously is a form of cognitive demand that shapes how certain animals think in ways that extend well beyond their social lives. Emotional intelligence. The question of whether animals experience emotions the way humans do has been debated for centuries, and the honest answer is that the evidence has shifted considerably in one direction. Rats have been shown in controlled experiments to help other rats in distress, even when doing so offers no personal benefit and requires passing up food rewards. Elephants have been observed standing vigil over dying herd members for hours. Dogs, through thousands of years of coevolution with humans, have developed an ability to read human emotional cues, facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, that even chimpanzees don't match. Whether these behaviors constitute emotional experience in a philosophical sense remains open, but the behavioral and neurological evidence that something meaningful is happening is now substantial enough that most researchers treat it seriously. Problem-solving intelligence. The ability to encounter a novel situation and work through it without prior experience or instruction is one of the cleaner measures of general intelligence, and certain species demonstrate it in ways that are difficult to attribute to conditioning or instinct alone. New Caledonian crows, in laboratory settings, have solved multi-step puzzles requiring them to use one tool to obtain a second tool needed to reach food, a level of sequential reasoning that was once considered beyond non-human animals. Octopuses, which are invertebrates with a nervous system structured entirely differently from vertebrates, have been observed unscrewing jar lids, navigating mazes, and escaping enclosures in ways their keepers didn't anticipate. The fact that problem-solving intelligence appears across species as neurologically different as crows and octopuses suggests it may emerge wherever the environmental pressure to solve novel problems is consistently high enough. Imitation and social learning. Many animals learn from watching others, but there is a meaningful difference between being triggered to perform a behavior by observing it and actually copying the specific method another individual used. True imitation, replicating not just the outcome but the technique, is cognitively demanding and relatively rare. Japanese macaques provide one of the most documented examples. In the 1950s, a young female named Emo was observed washing sweet potatoes in a stream before eating them, removing the grit that made them unpleasant. The behavior spread through her troop over the following years, passed from individual to individual through observation. It wasn't instinct, and it wasn't discovered independently by each monkey. It was learned. That distinction matters because it means the behavior could accumulate and refine over time, which is one of the foundational conditions for culture. Self-awareness. One of the standard tests used to probe animal self-awareness is the mirror test. An animal is marked with a spot it cannot see directly, then placed in front of a mirror. If the animal touches the mark on its own body after seeing the reflection, it demonstrates an understanding that the image in the mirror represents itself rather than another individual. Very few species pass this test consistently. Great apes pass it, dolphins pass it, elephants have passed it, European magpies, birds, have passed it, which was surprising given how different avian brain structure is from mammalian. What the test actually measures, and whether passing it is the only valid indicator of self-awareness, remains an active area of debate. Some researchers argue that species failing the test may simply be less visually oriented, not less self-aware. The test itself may be a narrower window into consciousness than it was originally assumed to be. Communication intelligence. Language, in its full human form, is unique to humans, but the capacity to communicate with sophistication, flexibility, and intentionality is not. Honeybees perform what is known as the waggle dance, a precisely choreographed movement that conveys the direction, distance, and quality of a food source to other members of the hive. The information encoded in the dance is specific enough that researchers have been able to decode it and predict where foraging bees will go. Prairie dogs have been studied by researcher Kon Slobodchikov, who found their calls contain information about the size, shape, color, and speed of approaching predators, a level of descriptive communication that goes well beyond simple alarm calls. Whales and elephants communicate across distances of many kilometers using frequencies below the threshold of human hearing, coordinating movements and maintaining contact in ways that only recently became measurable with modern equipment. Numerical intelligence. The ability to distinguish between quantities, to understand that 5 is more than 3, or that adding one item to a group changes the total, exists in a number of species and appears to be more widespread than was once assumed. Chimpanzees have been trained to associate Arabic numerals with quantities and can arrange them in correct sequence with accuracy that rivals young children. More striking is what untrained animals demonstrate in natural settings. Lions have been observed using numerical assessment when deciding whether to approach or avoid groups of rival animals, making decisions consistent with counting rather than simple comparison. Bees can be trained to associate symbols with specific quantities. Fish have demonstrated the ability to choose the larger of two groups when food is involved. The cognitive foundation for numerical thinking appears to be both older and more broadly distributed across the animal kingdom than the complexity of human mathematics would suggest. Deception intelligence. Deliberately misleading another individual requires a specific kind of cognitive ability, a theory of mind, the understanding that other beings have their own knowledge and beliefs that differ from your own. Deception, in other words, requires modeling what someone else knows and then acting to manipulate that model. Chimpanzees have been observed leading rivals away from food sources and then doubling back once the rival is out of sight. Fork-tailed drongos, a bird found across sub-Saharan Africa, mimic the alarm calls of other species to startle them into dropping food, then steal it. The drongo varies the calls it uses, apparently to prevent other animals from learning to ignore a single repeated alarm. That variation suggests the bird is tracking the effectiveness of its own deception and adjusting accordingly, a layer of strategic thinking that sits well above simple opportunistic behavior. Adaptive intelligence. Some animals demonstrate an ability to adjust their behavior rapidly in response to changing environments, not over generations through evolution, but within their own lifetimes in response to new pressures. Urban crows in Japan have been documented placing walnuts on road crossings, waiting for cars to crack them open, and then retrieving the contents during red lights. Nobody taught them this. It appears to have developed as a response to the specific environment those birds inhabit. Urban coyotes across North America have adjusted their activity patterns, territories, and diets significantly within a few generations of expanding into cities. Raccoons, rats, and certain bird species show similar patterns of rapid behavioral adaptation. What this form of intelligence reflects is a capacity for flexible learning that allows certain animals to thrive in conditions that didn't exist when their species evolved, which, in a world that changes as rapidly as this one does, may be the most practically valuable form of intelligence there is.